Welcome, welcome everyone to a special edition of the Inside Talent Podcast live stream version. This is what we do on a fairly regular basis with our friends from Horsefly, Erika Oliver and Will Crandle. And today we welcome Franziska Sackmann from WTW. And we're today going to talk about talent intelligence, labor market analytics, and employee data, aka workforce intelligence, for sourcing. So welcome everyone. Fran, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Erika, how's it going?
Doing great. Living the dream here in not so sunny Boston, but that's par for the course.
Yeah, we've got off and on sun and floods here in the Dallas area, which is just fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Will, how's it going where you are?
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Craig.
All right, Fran, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role and your organization and help tee us up for what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, sounds good. So I'm Fran, usually based in the UK, but today I'm joining you from my parents' basement in Germany, just so everybody knows. I work at WTW, also known as Willis Watson. We operate within the insurance and financial services space mainly. I lead two global teams, but today we're going to mainly focus on one of the teams, which is global talent sourcing and market intelligence. Been in the space for over 5 years now. And what we do as a team is we usually get involved when we're not receiving the kind of applications that we're looking for. So we then go out, get a good understanding of the labor market, see, who's out there, where do they work, where do they live, how much experience have they got, what kind of skill sets, and then base our strategies around how to get them excited about joining WTW on it.
All right. Fantastic. So WTW is a fascinating organization. Why don't you give us a little background on what Willis Towers Watson does? And because I think, and for me personally, I wasn't really aware of all the focus areas, and of course, mainly it's the insurance industry. But give us a little background there.
Yeah. Oh, what don't we do? I think is more the question. How much time do you have? So I try and keep it short. We've got about 45,000 employees. We're in over 120 countries. And we do operate on the one hand side in what we call the risk and broking space. So that's all about insurance, broking in all kinds of different disciplines that you could possibly imagine across the globe. And then the other part of the business that we do have is health, wealth, and career, which is all about, benefits, about how do we get candidates excited about joining companies, but also how do we make sure that they develop when they join. So we do a lot within that space as well. And then we do actually quite a lot within the retirement space as well. So it doesn't sound so exciting, I think, for many people, but it's incredibly interesting. There is so much happening within that space. And I think something that is very important to all of us at any given time in our lives. But sometimes we don't like to think about that too early on, I'd say, in our journey.
So interestingly, I've done a lot of work over many years with big insurance companies, big financial services companies, the world's biggest banks in the world, and there's always a serious sourcing function inside those organizations. So, Fran, why is that?
Good question. I think I kind of alluded to it a little bit already with what I talked about, the retirement space. I think on the one hand, it's the lack of knowledge, I think, in a way, as to what the tasks and the jobs actually entail and how interesting they are. And secondly, it's a very small space. So we see a lot of the talent rotating around in the top companies, time and time again. So it's very challenging to get the right people on board, I would say. And for that, of course, you do need a good sourcing function to proactively, I think, engage with talent as well. You know, oftentimes when you advertise within that space, you're not receiving the hundreds of applications that you might receive in other industries. We really need to work hard to get the quality of talent into the companies that we're looking for, and especially to then be able to innovate and develop what we already do, to not just stagnate and kind of do the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I don't know that everyone associates, labor market data and workforce analytics with sourcing, right? I feel like that's something that we don't talk about enough, and it's a real thing. And I've used it in multiple scenarios to hone in on the types of candidates that you're looking for, where perhaps you should be sourcing from, right? Where you could build pockets of talent if it's not going to be right in your backyard and in your office. And I've used tools like Horsefly to get that information, certainly. But Will, I'm going to throw this one to you. What have you seen with Horsefly customers that really ties sourcing to this kind of information?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the sort of gap close between talent acquisition, workforce planning, talent intelligence, people analytics. Like, we're seeing pockets of people from various departments doing a bit of everything. And have you heard of the term talent density? Hung Lee and Adrian Thomas have been talking about it. And it's really focusing in on how many skills do your workforce have. The more skills you have, the more dense your talent is seen. And I think it's really interesting, because we're definitely seeing talent acquisition people with workforce planning skills, and they're performing those tasks. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's happening a lot. I'm not sure whether you're seeing that, Fran, within your team, people with wider capabilities.
Definitely, and we very much encourage it. So the way that we usually approach any kind of new role, for instance, that we work on, or if we're looking to maybe expand what we do in different countries or anything like that, we always start with labor market intelligence. And that's just to understand what the actual landscape looks like, because how could you possibly know what to do if you don't know what the market looks like? And I think oftentimes we also see very historic knowledge. We've always hired from this place, or that place has always taken our talent. But then when you actually look at the numbers, that might not cooperate what people are telling you. And we can't really expect our hiring managers, our business, to be at the forefront of that and to have that knowledge. That really is, in my opinion, our job, because we work in the recruitment space, right? So I would expect that my team is aware of it, and then we can share that knowledge. And then, like I said earlier, actually build strategies around what the market looks like versus this is what we think it should look like.
So I want to dig into that a little bit, and I think you're right. I mean, we have to build personas, and we have to build market information, and hiring managers don't know that they need that information often, right? Hiring managers, I say this a lot. I'm gonna bag on hiring managers now. Hiring managers, bless their hearts, are not trained generally in either managing or hiring. Right? They're in their job because they were good at their old job, and they have a project to complete, a deadline, a budget. They have to get things done. They know what they think they know, and they know what they like. They know what they think it should cost to hire someone, but they're not always spot on. And so I think starting with the right data is a big help. And I think that starts at the intake stage, right?
Yeah, I would agree so. And I think it also helps you in a way to start at it from a neutral space, which, well, as neutral, as data can be. But it's mainly if we start with data and we share that data with whoever is involved within, that recruitment for that specific role, team, or whatever, or decision making where we base teams, then that helps us not only educate, but start off at a point where we're starting on that journey. We're looking to understand what is the kind of skill set that we require, that we're looking for. And then from a very neutral perspective, present that's what the market looks like within the parameters that we've been given. And then you kind of go form your strategy. And if, for some reason, maybe further down the line, it doesn't work out the way that you had anticipated, then when you then present the data with possible other options, so let's say we widen the location parameters, or we open it up to another country, or, we drop this skill set because we think we can teach them, then number one, someone's already seen that kind of information, so it's not new and you don't have to explain it from scratch. And number two, they're like, okay, I get it. And you can have, I think, a much more fruitful conversation, rather than when it appears that you're just trying to use the data to get your point across.
So do we find often that, and I've seen this before, and so Lord Cromwell Abrigo says that having talent intelligence equates to more efficiency. Erika, is it possible that hiring managers aren't necessarily all about efficiency at the beginning of the process?
Yeah, that's a great call out. I think most hiring managers want to be, but I think for reference to the audience, I was in recruiting for several years. Sometimes hiring managers already have a candidate in mind, or sometimes hiring managers are like, I don't know if I really need this requisition, but I'm going to just see what's out there. So, I think ideally in many cases, they'd like to be that way, but it's not always necessarily the case. Another point I wanted to make, based on what you guys were talking about before, Fran and I have talked about this a lot. We partnered together at a previous company, and we're so excited to partner with you now at WTW. One of the challenges we come up against is the gut instinct of hiring managers. Like, they've been in the space for years. They think they know everyone in the space for years, and sometimes they do, but they have a gut instinct about what it should cost or how long it should take to hire that really isn't backed by data. And so Fran and I have talked about this, for a long time. We even come up against this within recruiting organizations, right? You have old school, long-time recruiters. We're in a very rapidly changing market. The salary data or supply data is different than what their instinct says. And so sometimes you have that internal pushback. And to Lord Cromwell's point, I think leveraging workforce intelligence to show from a neutral place and iterate along the way, both internally and externally, is just critically to hopefully get to that efficient space.
Yeah, I think sometimes we hear from hiring managers, well, let's try this first, right? And I would say to sourcing teams out there, maybe also in tandem, do what you think is going to work, so that you don't waste valuable time trying it the hiring manager's way if you know that's probably not going to work. I mean, rarely do we do any very cold intakes without having done any research, right? So what's probably going to work. So in tandem, I would run that alternate search, so that as soon as what the hiring manager is asking for doesn't work, you can then exchange for, hey, how about this? And if you're doing it with data, and if you're doing it with, hey, we do have some candidates that I think might work, if you're willing to budge a little on this parameter, right? All right. So, Fran, we talked earlier about wildcard profiles. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, my favorite profiles. So speaking of, let's try it that way first. That's, of course, what we usually do, because we want to find that, perfect profile for what the hiring manager and the team is looking for, to really complement the rest of what the team has already got. But that doesn't necessarily always exist, or especially within our space, sometimes in very, very low numbers. So we don't always have the luxury of having, you know, a huge talent pool that we can activate talent from. So we need to be smart and I think savvy about what we do and how we approach things. So that's where wildcard profiles come in. Wildcard profiles could be someone that, you know, maybe has got some of the experience, but not all of the experience we're looking for, or they have worked in a similar industry to what we're looking for, but not exactly the industry that we are looking for. But for some reason, that profile might have caught our eyes because we think they could be really valuable for what we're trying to achieve as a business to succeed in what we've set out to achieve. And so an agreement that we oftentimes have is we present you with the kind of profiles that we're looking for, but let us show you at least a few wildcard profiles and do have a conversation with them. Just, you know, a coffee chat, a kind of get to know conversation, even if it's just for you to kind of understand the different lens. But really what we're looking to achieve with that is bringing in that diversity of thought. I think I've said it earlier as well, within such a small industry, there is a lot of very similar experience. So when we then actually do have the opportunity to bring someone in with a slightly different experience, that is where I think we can really, really make a difference in what we're doing and in pushing ourselves a lot further than maybe what we would have been able to anticipate. So one example of that is last year, we've worked on quite the big project of standing up a new team within WTW, and we've had this phenomenal hiring manager. I know we usually bash them, but you know, he was absolutely incredible, and he was happy to speak to any kind of wildcard profile that we did show him, and he just couldn't get enough. So we really had to stop it at some point because we said, okay, that's, you know, enough now. He's spoken to a lot of people, but he found it so incredibly helpful just because there are so many different viewpoints that he had never even considered, because he's surrounded by people that have got a similar experience. And I think that was such an eye-opener. And I love sharing that story because I think it really showcases the impact that those profiles can have. And then secondly, it actually had a massive impact on our hiring strategy for that. We completely flipped around what the team would look like and had very different profiles to what we initially set out to do.
I love hearing that. I think that's just fantastic. And if you can introduce the concept and sell managers on the concept of wildcard profiles, you do very often end up with a better, more well-rounded team, right? And that's fantastic. I'm starting to see HR technology software tools that will help to identify sort of contextual information from resumes and profiles. So AI is actually starting to be a big deal in practicality, not just in let's talk about AI because it's going to end up killing us all. But in reality, we're starting to see some of these tools actually do the job that we hoped they would do. And we're actually starting to get some of that really cool information from Horsefly as well. And one of the things that I love about what Horsefly has recently introduced is the function right in the dashboard of cost of living. This is my favorite new, and Erika, I'm going to come to you with a question in a second, but first, Will or Erika, whichever one of you like, please tell us a little bit about this new function within Horsefly.
Will, you take this one. I mean, I could definitely speak to it, obviously, but just the excitement we've had around launching this feature, it's been a labor of love for a few months. So as the big boss, Will, do you want to start on this one? And
I'll give an overview. I think when we started thinking about this feature, we didn't want to just sort of replicate a lot of the information that's out there. Like there's a lot of cost of living aggregators out in the wild. We wanted to really drill down and understand on a deeper level, what the cost of living really looks like. So we didn't just fold in a couple of generic sources. We of course folded them in, but we also found a lot of new ones, and we wanted to introduce salary as part of that as well. So you're able to look at how what salary looks like based on the cost of living. And you can look at like high salary, low cost of living areas, or low cost of living and low salary areas. And we've sort of mapped the whole of the globe on a town by town basis to understand, what those hotspots look like. And I'm sure Eric can talk about how our clients have used it.
Yeah, I mean, the city by city, town by town basis is just really so critical. And, from a US perspective, I'll just take the greater Boston area as an example. If you are looking at Newton as an example, the cost of living is going to be way, way higher than it's going to be in Quincy. Or if we think about, I mean, you could probably speak to this more, Craig, but like Dallas Fort Worth versus other parts of Texas versus Austin versus West Texas. We could go on a whole nother rant on this in terms of untapped talent and lower cost areas. And I think that's one of the most powerful elements that our cost of living new feature brings to the table. I think also thinking about something that Fran mentioned earlier around alternative location strategies when you're bringing data to hiring managers. Gosh, when I was at Meta, oftentimes it's like, okay, we ideally want to hire engineers, which has since changed over the last couple of years. We want to hire engineers, the best talents in San Francisco or in Seattle. And sometimes these biases remain long after that actually being the truth. And it's just the power that the cost of living feature incorporates with the rest of our other feature set to just give a holistic picture of the why behind recommendations that we're making, whether it's talent acquisition, workforce planning, or just general business strategy. So we're super excited.
And I think, sorry to just interject there, but yeah. I think that can also be super helpful when you look at it from an employer brand and recruitment marketing perspective. As you're looking to diversify your workforce, oftentimes we don't necessarily have all of the data that we would like to have access to, but exactly that kind of information can really help when actually building marketing campaign outreach strategies, when you're looking at what kind of locations am I going to target. And that is not just for sourcing, but like I said, for other parts as well. It's just incredibly helpful with that, but also then utilizing the keyword section, for instance, as in Horsefly, then helps you from an optimization perspective, what to use as well. And it's just, incredible.
So, Fran, you talk about trying to be as neutral as possible when in presenting some of this data. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think for me, it's important that we are as neutral as possible because we want to actually depict the market as it is, rather than just getting a point across because, let's say I've spoken to 5 candidates and they've all had a really high salary expectation. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually the case. I might have just gotten a few people that work in companies that, have amazing salaries. So good for them. But I think it's to help us form an actual strategy that is realistic in a way as well. We do need that information as neutral as possible so that, number one, we can build that trust with our hiring managers and the teams that we work with, so they can trust that we will always do our best to get a real market overview rather than just using the data to help us make the point that we want to bring across. I guess is what I said in many words, but that's for me what it boils down
to. I like the way you say things in many words and few words.
Same.
Economy of explanation. Yes, that's right. Okay, so Fran, I want to get your perspective on this. In the U.S., we've seen the U.S. economy is showing signs of a slowdown. Now, those of us who have been living in the actual world for the last few months or year or so have felt like, okay, this economy is not great. But economists say, no, the economy is fantastic. Everything's fantastic. But finally, all the indicators and the reports are lagging events, right? They're lagging data. And so now we're finally getting a report that the U.S. economy is slowing, consumer spending is down, the job market is cooling, and economic growth is slowing. From the European perspective, how is that affecting things there? And what are you seeing on your side?
I think we've, especially speaking from a UK perspective, we've seen that slow down, I think, a lot more than maybe what the US has already seen. So I think we've lived that reality for a lot longer. And the reality from a recruitment and talent perspective is that people aren't looking to move as frequently as they were, would have done maybe even a year ago. And that means for employers, it's even more challenging to get that talent to move over. So we have to have really good reasons and for them to be able to join us. And I think that's where we really need to understand as a company, what are our selling points? Why should somebody be joining us? And communicate that with the talent from as early on as possible. And I guess give them a sense of calm, I guess, in a way, that if they're going to join us, it's going to be fine. We do have that role open for a reason. We are looking for you to join us and to stay with us for a long time. But from US perspective, I actually just read a survey that W2W published just recently. It's from Q1 of this year, and it was taken across the US. And 72% of respondents said that they are not looking to change companies anytime soon. Just putting that into perspective, in 2022, we did the same survey, and we had 52% of people saying that they were looking to leave their current employer. So that's a huge change, and it speaks exactly to, Craig, what you just alluded to as well.
It's interesting. Jenny just mentioned on the comments that it's an election year, and so we know there's going to be issues in an election year, right? But I detest how we go along as in theory, fully functioning organization, aka the U.S. Government, saying, everything's great, knowing it's an election year, knowing we don't have good choices in an election year here, and knowing that there's going to be a lot of hesitancy as we see how things unfold. And we're not prepared for this somehow, right? And so, Will, I'm going to throw this to you because you study some of this stuff more than the rest of us. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're in election year in the UK here as well, so right. There's a lot of uncertainty and thoughts, and it just makes everyone nervous about moving around. It doesn't surprise me that 72% of people saying that they want to stay in the same job, and they don't want to risk, moving to a new company or losing their job. And I just hope that we see the positive change come towards the end of the year. We're sort of seeing positive movements with our clients in terms of hiring strategies and plans. I know it goes against all sort of indications from a market perspective, but hopefully that will follow on and have a positive end to the year.
So interestingly, I was looking at some Horsefly data, some projection data, and trend data for tech workers, and we're at an all-time low for demand right now. In the past couple of years, right, and it's almost an all-time low for in the past 10 years. And so, but the curve shows that it starts to grow in the fall, as everything should, right, once the election's complete. But generally, when these trends show up in an economic tool like Horsefly, it's accurate. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. But Fran, I want to go back to something you said a minute ago. We have to overly reassure candidates right now that we're stable. This is a good place to go. We're not about to have a bunch of layoffs. So I guess a little bit of employer branding goes a long way in a market like this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's about sharing our authentic colleague stories, not, the stock image type of information where everyone's like, oh, this could be any company. But it's the fundamental understanding of what makes you and your company so special. So for us, for instance, we know it's our culture. We've got incredibly intelligent people within our teams that really know what they're talking about. They're absolute experts within their field, but everybody's incredibly generous with their time. We collaborate amazingly, and it's sharing that with the outside world as well. And I think just in general, oftentimes as employers, we don't do a good enough job of that, because I think sometimes I feel we're just still a little bit behind with recognizing that is one of the most important tools that we've got available, which is sharing what our colleagues are up to, what are the cool things that we do that you might not see if you look at our corporate website, for example. Really show our, I guess, character in a way on our, I don't know, Instagram channel or something like that, and have fun with it as well, and don't make it overly corporate, I guess, in a way.
I love
show
that.
people who you are.
Yeah. I was profiled in an article in 2009, another very uncertain economic time, in Universum magazine. And Universum is an employer branding organization, if people listening don't know. And I said in 2009, echoing what you're saying now, Fran, that an organization's employer or employee brand should be transparent and come from within the organization, from its people, and not just be about pretty pictures and pretty words. And I think that hasn't changed, right? If you're trying to paint up your brand instead of just making it authentic and transparent, then that's going to be a trick. Lord Cromwell says offshore outsourcing industry benefits this economy slowdown in the U.S. And it does. Absolutely. You see immigration numbers go up for temporary foreign nationals working in this country during times like this. You see offshoring teams build up. You see project work in talent acquisition teams start to go up if hiring is slowed down. And I'm seeing that now with my customers, who are mostly enterprise level employers. There's all kinds of projects spinning up. So how do we spend this budget, right, is kind of the hot potato game. And that's happening. So, there's real and sort of, social proof and evidence that things are moving, let's say, and we're going to have a little bit of a slowdown before we have a speed up, I think is probably the lesson here. And then Jenny says, given the last 2 years in recruiting, the adoption of AI and the election, she questions the market coming back the way it was before. Many jobs have been replaced by technology. The question is, what percentage are permanently gone? And I'm hearing from multiple sources that we'll never go back to the way things were before, right? We will never have the numbers in talent acquisition that we did in the past. And we're probably never going to have housing prices as low as they were and interest rates as low as they were, and many things. I mean, we may be stuck with the fact that it's just going to cost more to live now, right? I mean, this was a long-term sort of, some would say, necessary adjustment that we're going to have to get used to. Now, do wages follow is going to be the question.
Yeah, I think what Jenny says there about many jobs have been replaced by technology. I think there's an element of that, absolutely, and I think it plays in really nicely with Fran's wildcard profiles, because a lot of the things that we're thinking about now is the traditional career paths aren't always there anymore. There's new roles, new skills, new combinations coming into the market. And we're slowly mapping all the latest ones to see what the potential of some profiles are. And you could sort of, when Fran's thinking about some of her roles, you could sort of put in some of the potential profiles as a wild card to see how hiring managers react to it and things like that. But that's a big part of our roadmap this year.
And I think it's all.
Oh, go ahead, Fran.
Go ahead.
No, I insist.
I was just going to say, I think it's also going to help us to map what kind of skills do we have internally. Who have we already got? And can we retrain them to do what I guess we will need in the future? And what can we do in that space? And I think that's really exciting, because if you're able to do that, you've already got someone who's in the organization, knows the organization very well. So you kind of stepping over a couple of steps of the induction and, getting to understand all of the things that you do in the first, I don't know, maybe 6 to 12 months. And you're going straight to, this is what you need to know in addition. And then I think they can bring in so much value in such a short amount of time that in my opinion, is where we all should be looking at for sure. And any tool that we've got that will help us with that is going to be helpful.
Fran, it's exactly what I was thinking, and it's, Jenny's right. There are some jobs that will never come back or not come back at the level. But, this is, I think, in periods of significant innovation, there are jobs that are going to go away, but there are going to be new jobs that are created. And I think your point and Will's point, and, a lot of the conversation that we're hearing now around skills-based hiring, that's why, a huge value in our product and our platform is really that keyword-based search, because it's like, okay, let's look at it in terms of the external market. Let's look at it in terms of how that compares to who we have internally. You're right, that like legacy IP for people who have been through a variety of changes, that's really hard to train. But if you're looking at a 20, 30, 40% upskilling path, then guess what? You're going to be on, sometimes folks like that work even harder, because it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to go figure it out. So it is a scary time to be in the midst of change, but I'm excited to see the other side of it. The other point I wanted to share before I completely forget is, Will, you were talking about, what we're looking at, and Craig, as far as like the forecasts and longitudinal data on our platform. I think myself, Fran, Craig, anyone, Will, even I know you have a lot of experience in the space. Any of us who've been through the ebbs and flows a couple of times of the calm or the downturn before the storm, it's like I almost feel it at a cellular level, the other side that's coming. And so, Fran, your point about the criticality of employer branding, like that's just as important when there aren't as many jobs open and there isn't as much hiring. In fact, it's even more important to say, hey, when you do land, when you are looking for something, have us be top of the list. Tying it back to the idea of like market-driven and data-driven sourcing, again, anyone who's recruiting in 2020 or 2019, how many of us were thinking like, God, if I could just have a month to focus on building a talent pool? We have a bit of that space in some industries right now. And I think, again, market-driven, data-driven talent pool development across a variety of locations, I think that is like what we talked about, Franz, like how could anyone develop a sourcing strategy without having a good handle on the market? So now's the time to do it.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very exciting time as well, because a lot of the tasks that we often do are very heavily admin focused in a way as well. I mean, in recruitment, I think if you ask anyone how much time they spend on admin tasks that they don't want to do, it's probably a lot. So if we can get away from that and actually focus on the human element of it and the human interaction in it all, then I think we'll provide a much better experience to everybody that is involved in the recruitment process. That goes for the recruiting teams, for the hiring managers, the hiring teams, and the candidates, of course, as well, because we're quicker at giving feedback. We're quicker at going through the different stages of the recruitment process, and you actually have time to build a relationship with someone. So now you can go from maybe just building a few relationships along the recruitment process for a specific role to building many, many more, and then being able to tap that talent time and time again, possibly if something suitable comes up in the future. And you're going to be able to do that much better because you've built that personal connection and relationship with them.
Absolutely. And a much quicker time to fill, which is what everyone's always thinking about. So
yes, talent velocity and talent density. These are our new terms, our new KPIs. So Paul Wood had an interesting point about, he thinks the standard of in-house talent management is dropping, and the skill and talent attraction has been dumbed down. And I think what he means is we hire people who don't really go through that big staffing training before they come into an in-house recruiting role as much as we did before. I think that's right. But I also think that talent acquisition is getting now pulled into talent management more, right? So we're definitely doing more with less in these teams. But then Jenny had an interesting point about internal upskilling should be huge in the future. And so Fran, for you, I want to say that I'm very curious if you feel like sourcing is going to be a big player in internal mobility, because it's the same function, right? It's just internal versus external.
Yeah, I think we need to tread carefully because I think, as sources, we're naturally very curious and we want to talk to everyone, and we see someone who could be really great to join that team or for that specific role. And of course, we want to talk to them. We want to get them excited about it. And we sometimes might be a little bit too excited and move too quickly with it. So I think there need to be good processes internally that are agreed upon by all the different parties in order to make that successful. Because what you don't want to happen is all of a sudden the recruiting teams are mainly recruiting internally and then you upset a lot of people. So it needs to be the right move at the right time for the right person. For me, a way that could look like is by possibly even speaking to their managers first and foremost, saying, hey, we've got this role. We've seen that, maybe this team member might be suitable for it. Kind of, can we reach out, that type of thing, to start it off very lightly. But from my perspective, we use all sources that we can get our hands on, right? We don't usually have enough of them. So anything that comes our way in addition, we're always happy to get involved with as well. But then, and that's slightly going off topic, I think our ATS systems are a hugely beneficial source to use as well. And we definitely, I think, oftentimes don't use that enough.
So I like what you said about treading lightly, right? Because managers are touchy about losing their people, right? But in an organization where we are going to, shoot for retention, we do have to have mobility, because otherwise, people can't do the same job forever. And so that requires education, right, amongst hiring managers, I think. And I think sourcing then gets into the areas of talent mapping, right? Because if we're thinking along the lines of, all right, how are we going to move around as an organization, keep people here, keep institutional knowledge, and still grow, right? But not have the churn and turnover that we've had in the past, because A, people don't necessarily want to leave their jobs right now, and B, it's expensive, right? So as organizations, we've laid off a number of people, right? And so now what we have, we want to keep. So do you feel like sourcing can start to get into that sort of talent mapping arena, and even at the front end in a job advertisement or a job description or a culture page? Oh, look at that. That we could have a map for a job like category that people could look at and say, hey, there's a real path for me here.
Yeah, I think there are two different elements to it for me. So the first one is, as we're mapping out our talent and we're showing different type of profiles, we could absolutely at that point include, and this is the amount of people that we've got internally that would fit the bill. So let's say you find 500 people that fit the skill set externally, there's 20 in the business. that might be suitable as well. So let's explore that a little bit further. So that could be one part of it. And then the second part of it, I think, is having tools that support our colleagues internally to figure out what that path could look like. So almost like, you build your skill profile, and then there are possibly recommendations, like these are the type of roles you can go into. That's what that would look like. These are the skills you might need to develop a little bit further if you want to develop in that, one direction that you've just seen. And I think if we implement those type of things, there is a lot more room for movement. But it's still the case, in my opinion, you're responsible for your own development just as much as the company. So that also gives the opportunity to the colleagues around the globe to actually, take that responsibility on in a very easy way to do it, and just see what's out there for them. Because I think oftentimes we're not even aware of all of the things that are happening within our own companies and the opportunities that lie within.
Fran, do you know, I'm thinking about looking sort of for talent mobility opportunities, especially with the sort of early industry people. Do you think like this hybrid model that's around now is sort of stifling that learning capability to enable the talent mobility? Because I remember when I was a kid in an office, if I couldn't listen to everyone around me and learn on the job, and as Jenny said in the chat, shadowing, people who know how to do the job, I don't think it would have gone anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point. And funny enough, I just thought about this the other day. I don't know how the topic came up, but for me, it was exactly the same. Even though I had the ability to work from home quite early on, like years and years ago, I always went to the office because I was able to listen to everyone around me who had much more experience. And I learned so much from the different kind of approaches and then made it my own. So I took, a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and then obviously just got my own spin on it as well. I found that incredibly helpful. At the same time, I've for a long time also worked with very global, very international teams where we weren't all in the same room. And I think it's about not only inviting those more junior team members to as many meetings and catch-ups that you can, so they can listen into it, they can learn about it, and then slowly give them more and more tasks to do themselves, to build up their confidence, to build up that experience. I think that's a way to go within that environment. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I don't think there is one right answer. And I also do think it depends on the individual. Some people learn a lot by being surrounded by others. Others prefer to be at home in a maybe more quiet environment and then take it, meeting by meeting as they're invited to it. So yeah, many different options.
And it's the role too, right? As you were talking about this, I was thinking about my first job in sales actually at a staffing firm, and very old school. My old manager, it's probably watching now. He was pretty intense, but I learned so much from him. And it was that exact thing. If a lead came in and I didn't answer that Craig, you remember old school US staffing? If I didn't call that person within 20 minutes, I'm sure he's at home shaking his head right now, but he knows it's the truth. He'd walk over to my desk and be like, yo, you got to call those leads right away. They just reached out to 4 people. Whoever calls them first is the one that's going to get the thing. So you're absolutely right. Like learning via osmosis. As someone who is somewhat introverted, I will never stop working when I'm at home. So I don't know if I want to go in the office more for that, or if I want to be home more for that. But yeah, it's a tricky thing to consider, isn't it?
Well, and that's another thing that we're not going to get back to normal on, right? I mean, we're going to be hybrid forever, right? From here on out, because several factors. One, corporations have sold off their office space for pennies on the dollar. You can always buy back. Let's say we have a really robust economy in a year and we start expanding a little bit, but I don't think the model is going to be the same. I don't think the model for even having office space is going to be the same, right? So That's not going to change. We're not going back. The other thing I think is that, yeah, the opportunity to learn and absorb and upskill and, move around in an organization is big, and AI is going to be a huge part of that, right? We've gotten so many comments about AI right now. I think that, learning and growth and learning and development are going to be heavily impacted by AI, because AI's greatest gift is that it can summarize information quickly. So, I mean, why read a 700-page novel when you can read a 3-page summary? I mean, sometimes the novel's really good, but not
But
very
I
often.
also think with that, it does come though that then you might not have the depth of knowledge either. And yes, you will develop that over time, of course, but I do think there's a lot of value in really digging deep into information, we've of course been speaking a lot about data, but digging into it and understanding it, because sometimes when you do get that kind of summary, it makes sense, but does that actually mean you understand how it all came about and how it came to the conclusion? Probably not in the way that you would have done if you had worked your way through it. So I think it's all about the balance and finding the right ways of using AI to really benefit us without compromising our knowledge and our learning experience.
1,000%, yeah. I'm really sick of receiving ChatGPT content. Whenever you've got a piece of work that someone's used ChatGPT just to generate, there's
Terrible.
no feeling, love. It's just empty piece of content that has got some good keywords on it, but it doesn't really tell the story. Like Fran's saying, it doesn't go into that level. So, I think it's great to summarize them, but you've got to do the work first.
So someone had a comment earlier about shadowing, and I think there's no better way to learn, right, than to sit with someone who does the job. And I think there's a funny meme going around that is old Google versus new Google. And so search before was search for the thing you want, and then the response is the thing you want. And new search is search for the thing you want, sponsored response, sponsored result, shopping, sponsored result. And you can't really search for the thing that you want. In fact, it's almost impossible to get there. You have to roll back search somehow in order to make that work. And I've tried it with the Wayback Machine, and you can actually kind of do it, which is interesting. But Erika and I are rabbit hole people.
Totally.
We will find the answers, and we will get the depth of knowledge that we need. But I fear that future generations that grow up on the ChatGPT answer and these small stock answers will sort of lose that desire and that skill. Am I crazy?
No, it's like, remember when what was it? Kind of the transition from like writing, oh God, now I'm dating myself, writing letters, to sending emails. Like that was a new thing, which sounds wild to even say. And then communicating more via text, via phone, and then the abbreviations and the sentences and emojis. I think you're absolutely right. And, we'll be curious to see if there's a tolerance for the time it takes for the in-depth digging to really get in-depth results, or, is there the comfort with the speed, like spelling? My mom was an English teacher, Craig, and like just watching the evolution of spelling with the newer generations, and it's not their fault. Like they've had spell check on everything, it's way cooler to text in one way than the full word. So, I think it is going to definitely change. We'll just see how it changes.
Yeah, you want to date yourself. I learned phonetically. I can spell anything. I also took 3 years of Latin, and
I did too.
Yeah.
We're OGs.
5.
Yeah, 5.
No,
None. Funny. Yeah. So Nabil says future generations will be wearing VR headsets to get in-office collaboration experience, and that's probably true.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. All right. Well, so Fran, this has been fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Erika and Will, as always. Thanks to everyone who joined in. We will do this again in a couple of months, and then we will all join up together at the TalentNet Live conference on November 8th in Dallas at Lennox International's headquarters. And you can find out information about that at talentnetlive.com. Come see us do this on stage. It's fun and very insightful. So we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks,
Thank
Fran.
you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.